A hunter must always be on the hunt. This is the first commandment, or bylaw, of the Hunter Association. Taken in the most literal sense, Kurapika appears to be the truest hunter of the four main protagonists. So why, in Netero's opinion, does he have such little potential? Given his mostly stellar performance in the exam, it's likely that Netero's judgment was based on his keen awareness that Kurapika's quest for vengeance could only lead to emptiness, labeling him as someone who couldn't or wouldn't make a significant contribution to the association or society in a meaningful way. It's an emptiness that Netero eventually felt himself when obtaining his own goal, a power so great that no one could challenge him. So once Kurapika accomplishes his goal, what will he do next? Well, there's a small glimmer of hope for him, a side of Kurapika that often takes a back seat to his rage, a side that lives for others rather than himself. We can only hope that he realizes this once he's avenged his clan, or before it's too late. Approximately 4 or 5 years before we met Kurapika in the Hunter exam, he was living a secluded life with the rest of the Kurta clan in a makeshift village hidden deep within a forest. He was an energetic kid with a sense of wonder about the outside world after his fateful encounter with Sheila, an outsider with aspirations of becoming a hunter. His hot-headed temperament leads him to clashing with the village elder, who refuses to let him take a test to qualify for journeying outside of the village. But his stubbornness and excellent bargaining skills eventually cause the elder to concede. His dedication to studying and genius-level intellect allow him to pass the first 2 tests with flying colors, but he almost fails the final test when his emotions get the best of him, which is a sign of things to come. This is where Pyro, Kurapika's best friend, comes into play. He provides a perfect balance to Kurapika's emotionally driven personality with his level-headed, calm demeanor, and shares an equal interest for adventure. Sometime before this exam, when attempting to save Kurapika from falling off a cliff, the two end up falling together, causing Pyro to suffer injuries to his legs and eyes, which have become weaker as time goes on. Kurapika feels a great sense of guilt over the situation, and a large part of his motivation to journey to the outside world is to find a doctor to help cure Pyro of these ailments. After that, Kurapika wishes to travel and enjoy the outside world with Pyro by his side. During the 3rd phase of this test, Kurapika is tasked with journeying outside to the nearest town to gather supplies and will fail if his eyes turn scarlet. When choosing who would go with him, he says it would all be pointless unless he could journey with Pyro. Although his motivation to cure his friend's disabilities is one of his greatest strengths, his protectiveness towards his friend and emotional instability leads him to a fit of rage when seeing Pyro get bullied, almost causing him to fail the 3rd test. Luckily for Kurapika, his friend is also a strategical prodigy and switched out the eye drops that would cause Kurapika's eyes to remain scarlet for the rest of this journey. It's a moment that solidifies just how much time the two have spent together and how well they know each other. Because of Pyro's clever trick, Kurapika is able to pass the 3rd test, gaining clearance to leave the village. During the final conversation between the two friends, Kurapika promises to return with a doctor to help Pyro. Pyro, however, reminds Kurapika that the reason they wanted to journey outside was originally inspired by the book given to them by Sheila. They wanted to have adventures like the main character in the story, so Pyro makes Kurapika vow to have fun during his mission to find a doctor. Kurapika makes this promise and sets off on his journey. Although this flashback was only 2 chapters long, it gave us so much detail on who Kurapika was and what motivated him back then. He has a desire for adventure, a strong connection and dedication to his friend, and a willingness to do whatever it takes to reach his goals. All of his traits I've described so far carry over in one way or another to the Kurapika we got to know throughout the rest of the series. If Netero had known about this side of Kurapika, perhaps he may have seen things differently when judging his potential. Unfortunately, only 6 weeks after Kurapika leaves the village, news breaks about the horrific massacre of his clan, and it's from this point forward that we start to see 2 conflicting sides or personas of Kurapika. He develops a tough exterior, a holier-than-thou attitude that one can only imagine is a defense mechanism to detract people from getting close to him. Considering his experience with normal people finding out about his Kurta heritage, it's a pretty reasonable reaction. By avoiding developing personal relationships, he'll also be able to focus on his goal of seeking revenge without distractions. I'll be referring to this as his dark persona. This is who we meet at the very beginning of the Hunter exam. He is so self-centered, he can't be bothered to learn Leorio's name, and flat out ignores him when Leorio attempts to correct him. He even goes as far as insults towards Leorio for not knowing the benefits of being a hunter. We see this kind of attitude time and time again when Kurapika interacts with someone he's not familiar with. But underneath his hardened outer shell, the kind-hearted Kurapika who cares deeply for his friends still exists. And witnessing Leorio spring past him during their fight to save the overboard crew member, followed by Gon jumping overboard with no regard for his own well-being, subdues his rage, revealing a brighter side to his character, which I'll refer to as his light persona. Their heroic acts likely provoke Kurapika's memory of a time when Pyro did the same to save him. He apologizes to Leorio and bonds with him during the first phase when they both discuss their goals in more details. More importantly, he sees something in Gon that piques his interest. I wouldn't say he reminds him of Pyro, because the two don't seem that similar, but I think it's fair to say that Gon reminds him of his own childhood when he still had a sense of adventure. For the remainder of the story, Gon acts as a beacon of light for Kurapika, guiding him back to normalcy, rivaled only by Melody. Kurapika slips back and forth between his two personas during this story, and it seems the less time he spends with Gon, the more we see the dark persona. During the first two arcs, when Kurapika spends the most time with Gon, it's clear to see his light persona is dominant. So let's focus on the times that Kurapika reverts back to his dark persona. The first instance of this occurs in Trick Tower. Until now, he's been relatively engaged with the group, getting to know them and working in tandem with them to complete each phase of the exam. But when it's his turn to fight a prisoner, his rage consumes him upon seeing the fake spider tattoo, and he brutally knocks the prisoner out. While he appears to have immediately calmed down after leaving the arena, I'd argue his dark persona is still lingering. He isolates himself from the group and selfishly refuses to finish the match when it's declared to not have officially ended, leaving Leorio to clean up after his mess. It's not until Leorio gets his first point in the next round that Kurapika rejoins the group to observe the rest of the match. The concern he shows for Killua before his match is proof that his light persona is back for a while. For the most part, he'll remain in this state all the way through the Hunter exam. During the final decision of Trick Tower, Kurapika is mostly passive, not stating what his choice would be. I'm inclined to say that his dark persona would have chosen the easy path that only 3 of them could take, doing whatever it takes to accomplish his goal. On Zevel Island, Kurapika lays low while Leorio is tricked by Tompa, jumping in at the last second to save the day. He claims to have been testing Leorio, a test he barely passes, but Kurapika remains by his side and decides to help him finish this phase, even though Kurapika already has enough points to pass himself. After this phase, the gratitude he shows Gon, the concern for Gon's mental state, and the encouraging words he gives are acts I'd only expect of his light persona. There is a moment, however, right before the final phase, where the dark persona makes a brief appearance. And that is during his interview with Netero. We know from Hisoka's interview with Netero that the first question he asks is why each candidate wants to be a hunter. Aside from Hisoka, we only see each candidate answer questions 2 and 3. Since Kurapika already revealed his motivations to the captain on the boat, he probably told Netero the truth and let his rage get the better of him. Notice that his eyes are closed in the panel where he answers the next 2 questions. Maybe to conceal the fact they've turned scarlet from his intense emotions. While he mentions being interested in Gon in a positive way, he claims that he'd be willing to fight anyone given a reason. Kurapika is smart enough to understand where this line of questioning could lead, so it's a bit of a selfish answer considering he may have to fight one of his friends. By the time Netero reveals the bracket, his excitement appears to have subsided, and his light persona is who we see throughout the rest of the exam and the Zoldyck family arc. During Gon's match with Hanzo, his eyes do turn scarlet, but the fact that he can barely contain himself from interrupting the match for Gon's sake is all the proof I need to confirm this belief. Selfishness and conceit are not present, which are 2 defining characteristics of the dark persona. After the tournament, he sticks up for Killua, claiming he was being controlled, and is willing to delay his own goals in order to help rescue Killua from the clutches of the Zoldyck family. This is the last time the light persona is dominant. When Kurapika splits from the group after returning with Killua, agreeing to meet up with them in York New City, he continues taking steps towards his original ambition, revenge for his clan and taking back their eyes. He spends 6 months away from his friends with only this in mind. Willing to risk it all, he puts his life on the line to create a Hatsu strong enough to destroy the Phantom Troop. The first glimpse of Kurapika after this 6-month period makes it obvious that something has changed, just by the stern expression on his face. He eventually arrives at the Nostrad family's mansion, and he's not there to make friends. Most of his dialogue is internal, speaking aloud only when necessary. But as much as he tries to hide his emotions and thoughts, it's pointless when in the presence of Melody. When the two are scouting the auction from atop a nearby building, Melody questions Kurapika about his affiliation with the Scarlet Eyes. He raises his defenses, asking for her motive. When she explains her ability to read his emotions by his heartbeat, Kurapika submits, knowing he can't hide anything from Melody. Regardless of his change in expression, though, the dark persona is still rearing its ugly face. After revealing so much about his plans, he asks Melody if she'll inform their boss. Her reply, "No, I don't want to die." She describes his heart as calm but icy, a perfect metaphor for his conflicting personas. There's a sense of relief that he feels from no longer hiding who he is, but his defenses are still up in case it backfires. Melody goes further, noting that Kurapika is willing to sacrifice himself for his goals, and quotes his thoughts, "If I have to kill her, so be it." On the surface, one may assume she means he'll sacrifice his life, but the fact that she follows it up with that quote leads me to assume she's actually talking about sacrificing who he is, his true self, the light persona. With all of this on the table, she's melted his icy defense and his light persona awakens after being dormant for 6 months. He asks Melody about her own goals. While she seems to have her own emotional shield up, the following scene feels more playful than anything, as if Kurapika is saying, "You can't hide from me either." And so the two form a bond, based on their tragic pasts. It's a shame their conversation is cut short when the Phantom Troop starts raising hell at the auction. When they arrive at the site where Uvo is fighting the Mafia, we could tell by Kurapika's expression and demeanor that his conversation with Melody has had a relaxing effect on him. But his dark persona takes charge immediately upon seeing Uvo's spider tattoo. Once the shadow beasts are eliminated, he recklessly starts walking towards the battleground. His rage is getting the better of him, ignoring his associates' pleas for him to reconsider. Thankfully, using her Nen, Melody is able to calm his rage once again, if only temporarily, right as their leader reaches out his hands to physically stop Kurapika. Who knows what would have happened if that hand had reached Kurapika's shoulder? He exhales, collects himself, and thanks Melody for stepping in. The fact that Kurapika thanks Melody goes to show that he's aware about the self-destructive nature of his dark persona. With a clear mind and determination to still capture Uvo, he formulates a plan with the rest of the group and executes it successfully. This demonstration of Kurapika's different approaches gives us a clearer understanding of the deviating paths his life could take. If he chooses to live by the methodologies of the dark persona, charging ahead blindly with his confidence and rage leading the way while ignoring those around him, it's no wonder Netero deemed his potential to be limited. But with a clear mind, concern for those around him, and concern for his own well-being, he could prove that old geezer wrong. Up until this point, I've described Kurapika in a way that you may assume I think he has multiple personalities, but trust me when I say that I understand his personality is more fluid than that. His behavior throughout the rest of this arc is evidence for that, as he sways back and forth between his willingness to make sacrifices and his desire to protect those he cares for. Describing his behavior as two personas was simply a way to get the point across that Kurapika is at war with himself. His primary motivations are split. When he's fueled by his rage and thirst for revenge, he becomes self-destructive because he's living for the dead. But when his focus shifts to those he's formed a bond with, his excellence shines even brighter. Which brings me to the current events of the manga. So if you haven't read it, stop this video now, go read it, and come back later. All set? Great, let's continue. I've brought up Netero's evaluation of Kurapika's potential several times so far, and Kurapika's current status as a member of the Zodiac traveling to the Dark Continent may be considered proof by some that Netero was wrong. But do keep in mind that Kurapika joined the Zodiac simply as a means to fulfill his own mission. However, circumstances surrounding the journey have put him in a position of protecting the 14th Prince, Wobble, who was just an infant. These two missions symbolize the difference I've described between his two personas. We've seen just how prevalent Kurapika's rage still is when he initially met Mizai, with just the mention of his clan's eyes triggering him to prepare for combat. Now imagine how out of control he may become when he stumbles upon the 4th Prince's trophy room and sees what is most likely the head of Pyro in a jar, surrounded by the eyes of his clan. In contrast to this, the look on Kurapika's face when he holds Prince Wobble in his hands is gentle and sympathetic. He sees a child who is helpless on her own, a possible reminder of his late friend Pyro. Considering this is probably one of the last arcs in Hunter x Hunter, it's safe to say that Kurapika's story will be wrapping up soon. With the chaos already taking place on the boat, Kurapika may need to prioritize one mission over the other, or make sacrifices in an attempt to accomplish both. With Gon completely missing from this arc and Melody busy on guard duty, Prince Wobble is the only one who could act as the guiding light that Kurapika needs to keep from going off the deep end. This brings me back to the question I posed at the very beginning of this video. Once Kurapika accomplishes his goal, if he's even able to do that, what will he do next? Will Prince Wobble become the small glimmer of hope for him, reminding Kurapika of the side of him that lives for others rather than himself? We can only hope that he realizes this once he's avenged his clan, or before it's too late. There's plenty to speculate about, and that's where I'll turn this over to you. What do you think of Kurapika's opposing goals, his conflicting personas, and how do you see this story playing out? Will it end in tragedy or happily ever after? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all once again for your support and for being patient for this video. I'll see you next time.